And I'm incredibly lucky that I've been given the trust to handle those characters, and they very much let me.
So, welcome to the show, Aislinn De'Ath or Ath.
Death. Death. Well, it's a wildly confusing name. You can just call me Death, to be honest. That does just as well.
If it helps, my surname relates to death. So,
Well, there you go. Death and Graves. Perfect.
so what got you into acting?
Well, I have. It's a very boring story, really. I think, like a lot of actors, it's just I've always wanted to be an actor ever since I was tiny, and my aunt was very, very briefly was an actor, and I remember going into a dressing room of a show that she was doing and just thinking it was the most exciting thing of all time. Like all the makeup, which back then was like real grease paint makeup, thick orange paint that you put on your face. But yeah, and it's I think acting, like a lot of careers, is a bit of a calling. It's not really something people should ever logically go into because the pay is terrible. It's very inconvenient. But if you've got to do it, you've got to do it.
What were some of your earlier acting roles for your career? Because, as you say, it's not something you typically just go into.
So I started on the first I started on the amateur scene. So I was doing lots of student stuff when I was at university before I went to drama school. I did a lot of the drama society stuff, and then after drama school, I did drama school as a mature student, so I was 23 when I came out. I did a lot of short films. First short film that I did ended up going to the London Independent Film Festival and doing quite well. I then went on to do years of short films. I did a national tour of Great Expectations as well a couple of years after drama school. And it kind of blossomed from there, and then Silent Witness wasn't that long after. And since then, it's kind of mostly been the indie circuit that I've been part of, and then my video games as well.
That's quite a bit to unpack. So, what is Silent Witness? What is that short film for anyone who doesn't know what's?
So Silent Witness is actually TV. Silent
Ah,
Witness is in the same way that The Bill and ER used to be, Silent Witness is a BBC drama that lots of actors kind of earn their stripes doing. So you see a lot of people on Silent Witness from years and years and years ago who are now enormously big actors playing tiny, tiny roles. And my role was teeny tiny. Played a stripper called Caitlin who gets murdered. So I was on the screen dead more than I was alive, I think.
so it's just a funny thing to say. I was dead more than I was alive.
Oh yeah. What was amazing is so Amelia Fox is the lead in Silent Witness, and I was really excited to meet her and really kind of quite overwhelmed because I'd grown up watching Amelia Fox on TV, and she actually referenced me in a magazine a couple of years ago, not by name because I doubt she can remember my name. We only worked together for maybe 3 days, 4 days max. But she said, "Oh, and there was this one poor girl who had to run in her underwear through the woods and got absolutely covered with maggots as well." And I was like, "Oh, that's me. That's underwear maggots McGee. That's me."
Could be worse. It could have been name dropped and then typecast into that.
That is very true. I'm very grateful not to have too much maggot incidents in my career.
How does the audition process for acting typically play out? Because do they call you? Do you go via an agency? Is it kind of both? Can you talk me through the start to finish of all of that?
So it's very, very different depending on what you're doing, what you're auditioning for, what the role is, what the budget is. For larger work, generally my agent would source that for me. So there's a big industry platform called Spotlight, for example. Either casting directors will get in touch directly with my agent, or my agent will apply for things on my behalf through Spotlight, and then I would go through an audition process, which, for example, for something like Silent Witness, would involve probably a self tape and then getting called in person to audition with a casting director and potentially a director and producer as well. For more indie projects, quite often nowadays it's just a self tape. So you put yourself on tape for something, you might get a call back, but 9 times out of 10 you get cast on the basis of that one video you filmed yourself.
So What makes a good self-tape compared to a bad one?
That's a good question. It's interesting. I think you get different answers depending on who in the industry you ask. So most casting directors would say, "Oh, don't worry about backdrop or lighting or any of that." But actually, I think for me, I think if you light yourself properly and you make sure that there's nothing too distracting in your background, like I don't know, your kitchen and it's really messy or something, or I don't know, a very distracting poster or something, then it's easier for them to focus on your performance. So when I'm doing self tapes, first, my setup's probably not dissimilar to this. A nice clear background, lots of light coming in from both sides so that you can see the light in my eyes. But I'm also always trying to give a performance that is authentic, is genuine, that I'm really feeling in the moment as well. And that I think gives something a little bit different. Like, you don't want to always be doing what's expected. You don't like, but there's a fine line of not wanting to do exactly the same thing as everyone else, but also not wanting to give a performance that's kind of constructed and you're thinking about what you're going to do and you're thinking, well, that will look cool, because you can see right through that. You can see when an actor's going, oh, I'm going to take off my sunglasses at this point because that looks really cool. It's not the same thing as just doing it in the moment because that's what your character's doing.
It's that balance between following convention and not following convention. That makes
Exactly,
sense.
yeah.
Because I think Stephen Bartlett said that the most successful people don't follow convention, but you can't completely break the rules because, well, this next bit's my bit, because otherwise it's just something completely different. So what have been some of the roles that you've gotten through your self-tapes?
Oh gosh, well, all of my video game work has been through self tape. So I put myself on tape for The Infectious Madness of Dr. Decker. And from that, they, based on that one self tape, they have cast me in all of their video games. So in various different characters. And I'm incredibly lucky that I've been given the trust to handle those characters, and they very much let me kind of create those characters myself, which is just such an honour. My role in Warhol, which has been cleaning up on the award circuit this year, which is really nice. That was a self tape, and prior to that, Lair as well. In fact, Lair wasn't. Lair was an in person audition, which is quite rare these days. There wasn't like a self tape portion of that before I went in. I just went straight into audition, which was actually really lovely. But yeah, I think it really, really does vary. I mean, I think the great thing about self taping is that you can do something as many times as you want before you pass it over to the casting director. But that can also be a bit of a bind as well, because the more you do something, the more you lose the natural flow of it, the authenticity of it. So you kind of don't want to do it more than maybe 2 or 3 times.
I understand that because I had to do a group project in college, and the art director for that literally made us do the same thing 4 times, and the energy by the end was like, ah. But
Yeah.
it's the. Have you ever heard the concept of 1,000 reps?
1,000 reps.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yes, yeah.
so for those who don't understand what I'm on about, you do something loads of times, and eventually you get better at it. Or there's a guy called
Yeah.
Alex Hormozy who's got the idea of 1,000 BB guns instead of one golden bullet, because eventually you'll get. Yeah. I actually seen the play, well, your bits for this, because the play for a fan was too long, for The Infectious Madness of Dr. Decker, and that's a FMV video game. For those who don't know what that is full motion video. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So back in the, I think it would have been the early 90s and late 80s, one of the most popular forms of video game was full motion video, which was where instead of something being a computer animated kind of look, it was real actors being filmed and often with a question led narrative. So a bit like a choose your own adventure game, but done digitally. So you'll have seen examples of that on TV in terms of Bandersnatch. That was based on the FMV concept on Netflix. And there was someone else. There are a couple of other versions that came out in the past few years that have been quite popular. But Bandersnatch, I think, is probably the most popular of those. And Deveki as a video game company, basically decided that they wanted to restart the love of that, because there's still quite a cult following for those games, but with higher production value, more attention to narrative, and still keeping an element of the kind of quite campy acting that there used to be, but toning it down slightly so that there were real emotional stakes involved.
Which one's been your favourite to play? Because you've done The Infectious Manners of Dr. Decker, Murderers Use, Poe Marone, was it?
That's right. So I've done Dr. Decker, The Shape-Shifting Detective,
That was the other one.
Dark Nights with Poe Monroe, and Murderous Muses was the most recent. Um, I've loved them all. I think my favourite is probably Decker, because Mariana was such a fascinating character. I think she was a beautifully written character. And I think the thing that I found really fascinating about the narrative arc of Dr. Decker was that often your outcomes as a player depended on moral choices that you made within the game. And often people didn't realise that. So the setup for people who haven't played it or seen any of the clips is that you are covering for a doctor, a psychiatrist who's been murdered by one of his patients. You are the therapist, and you are interviewing his patients, firstly to solve their issues, but also to try and solve the crime. So, and there's a bit of a Lovecraftian tilt to it as well. So Mariana, my character, is someone who, she's been having blackouts and she keeps ending up on the beach. And running concurrent to this storyline is the fact that young men have been going missing. Now, Mariana is deeply traumatized. She has been through some awful, awful trauma that she is only just starting to remember, and it's clearly affected her. She is a broken woman. She is also, partly because of this trauma, hypersexual. And if, as a player, you're playing this therapist and you're kind to Mariana and you're just kind of trying to see if she's the murderer, then nothing bad really happens to you. Like, you might work out who she is, you might find out more about what she's done. If, however, you play it and you're flirting back with her and you're responding to her hypersexuality, which obviously is a completely unprofessional thing to do as a therapist and deeply, deeply morally questionable, then it takes you down some dark routes. And it was fascinating watching the playthrough. It seemed like particularly men playing this game, and they'd fall down the trap of flirting back with this woman who is their patient. And then I won't spoil it, but she accuses you of something quite terrible, and you see all these players go, "Hang on, whoa, I never did. Whoa, no, absolutely not. This is completely unfair." I was like, well, it's you've put yourself in an awkward situation there, though, haven't you?
I did see like I said, I've seen your bits. I was there like, what the hell is going on? And even I found myself thinking, I'm trying not to go mad myself. I'm just here like, I'm doing this for research, not entertainment.
It's a very twisty, turny, complicated story, and I just love it. Like, I enjoy it as a player, and I enjoy it as an actor.
Oh, so you have played them as well? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How is it playing?
I haven't played all of them, but I've played Decker, and I played Shapeshift, and I've played a little bit of Murderous Muses.
Sure, how is it acting compared to playing your role? It's kind of like a filmmaker seeing their own film on screen.
Yeah, kind of. I think what's interesting is the experience of watching myself in a film feels very, very different to the experience of playing a game in which I'm interacting with myself. It's a bit meta, but I think the mechanism that Dveki have worked on of the question and answer thing is brilliant. I'm not really much of a gamer. I'm very, very dyspraxic. I am inevitably one of those people that ends up playing games like, if you have to do like a walking aroundy game where I'm stuck in a corner trying to go up a wall almost, because I'm so crap at directions and all that stuff. So for me, the question and answer mechanic works really, really well. I think I still get that slight element of watching my own performance and kind of picking it apart a little bit, because I think it's very hard to avoid doing it when you're watching your own work. But I think because it's more interactive, there is more of an ability to be objective about it.
I understand that. I guess you can also see what you've done, right and wrong, and self-feedback. What's the difference between acting in those compared to shorts, films, and TV series?
I don't really know. I mean, I when I get anxious when I'm going on set, it's very rarely to do with the actual acting, and it tends to be more about meeting people because meeting a lot of people at once has always made me a bit anxiety ridden. So for me, my anxiety is like almost first day of school anxiety, where I'm like, oh my god, I'm going to meet new people, and what if they don't like me, and what if they think I'm crap, and what if I say the wrong thing? But the second I'm on set and I'm acting, all of that melts away because I'm not me anymore. I'm being someone else. So you have a degree of removal, which is just so brilliant. I think it's more nerve wracking. It's more nerve wracking sometimes, weirdly, being on a short film, particularly if it's a mid range short film where you've got quite a big crew, because you kind of can't escape from people. So when you're working on in TV, you've got your own trailer. So actually, in between shooting, quite often you're just in your trailer, like resting, and then you go on tape, and it's so fast. Like the turnaround is so quick. You often don't get a chance to get to know people, which is sad because they're great people and really interesting people. But when I'm going on set, particularly on that first day, where you can't escape, there isn't really a green room. You're just kind of thrust into getting to talk to people, and often they're people that already know each other because they've been working on the short film for a while. But yeah, acting itself is the thing that gives me confidence. So the second I'm on set, like often I'll go and do a scene, and afterwards I feel much more comfortable talking to people because it's given me that kind of crutch.
I also think you've seen people enough times is it you expose yourself to the same environment and then you can get to know people.
Oh yeah, like if I'm on set for like a couple of days even, by the second day I'm not nervous anymore. I've gotten to know people. I really pushed through my anxiety and make a point of going and introducing myself to everyone and chatting to people and offering to make a cup of tea, do the rounds, because that's the thing that gets me through it. I know I can't just hide away because I mean that's awful, isn't it? You don't want to be that actor that's like, screw the rest of you, I'm gonna sit in a dark room and not interact.
Have you ever met any actors like that? They go, up yours, I'm just going to be in the corner.
Yeah, a few, and I think it's every now and again it's because someone has an ego the size of a hot air balloon. But to be honest, most of the time I think it does come from a place of anxiety or trying to conserve energy. Like if you've got someone who has a lot of lines or has to perform in a way that's quite emotionally draining, sometimes you kind of need to like shutter yourself in a little bit. So I do get it, and there have been times when I was doing Lair, I had to do a very very emotionally raw scene, and we actually started before lunch, then break for lunch, and then came back and finished it, which is always difficult when you're doing something that's very overall. So I actually stayed away from people over lunch that day, just so that I could kind of stay in it a little bit and not bring anyone down as well. Like you never want to bring other people down and make their day gloomy.
No.
So that's probably the only time I've been very guilty of that.
Have you ever met any actors who go into the profession wanting to become like an A-list Hollywood actor? Yeah, and how well does that typically go for people?
Not great. The reality is, I mean, I think it's really interesting. I come across people in this industry quite often where they far prefer the experience of walking down a red carpet and being photographed to being on set. And in my experience so far, I've never met anyone who has lasted in the industry who prefers being on a red carpet to being on set, because it's not the job. You're not getting paid to be on red carpets. It's a useful thing to do to build up your brand. It's important to do it to market the film, and it's a kind of a necessary evil of the industry. But if you want to be an actor so that you could be famous, I mean, There are easier ways to get famous that aren't being an actor, you
Sorry
know?
to interrupt, but necessary evil?
Yeah, it's a dramatic turn of phrase, but for me, I'm very good at faking it on a red carpet. I'm very good at posing, doing the looks, networking with people. But I am a bit of a homebody. I would always rather be at home in my pajamas, eating a Chinese takeaway. But then it's one of those double edged things. Like I also love going to those events because I despite being quite anxious socially, I've met some really good friends at those kind of events, and I've met really interesting people. And I love red carpets and I love screenings when it's not my own. Like I love going to those events and watching other people's art and not having to be perceived as much. Like whereas when it's my film, if I'm the lead character particularly, you have so much attention thrust on you, and often I'm very aware that particularly as a woman, that attention is less because of your ability and what you've achieved artistically and more because of how you look on a red carpet, which is what I would like to get away from. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Like I would always rather be on set, like doing the job, you know?
No, I get that because I think my first guest, she said she had someone she had a model, but they just wanted cameras all around them. They didn't actually want to be a model. And the thing I learned very early on in my life was if you just want the end result, but you hate what you do, well, guess what you'll be doing when you get to the end result?
Yeah. Yeah. But I also think, this job is not as glamorous as it looks. And as soon as you're in the industry, you know that. I mean, I've posted stuff on my Instagram before, and I've had friends say to me, "Oh my gosh, that looked so glamorous. Was that really cool?" You have to go to them. Well, I was queuing up for half an hour to get that one photo on the red carpet, and then you're in a crowd of people drinking overpriced warm gin and tonic, and so it's lovely to have those moments, and I am glad that I have those moments. I'm glad that I get to show those moments to like my family who might not like, because it's also that thing, isn't it, where you go, some of the stuff that I'm proudest of isn't going to resonate with some of my friends and family who aren't in the industry because it's not as important to them. Whereas seeing me on a red carpet, for them, they're going to have more of that connection of like, oh, that's what actors do. That's like an actory thing. We've seen celebrities do this. So it's quite nice sometimes to have that in terms of validation, to be able to go, yeah, I was on a red carpet, I did a thing.
Yeah. And there's also social proof as well. It's like, I was here.
Yeah.
What have been some of your favourite roles so far?
Oh God, I mean, it's like having to choose a favourite child, isn't it, that question? There are so many. I mean, I really liked playing Maria in Lair because she's just so imperfect. She's a bit of a crap mum. She is in her first lesbian relationship and she's messing that up as well. She's just not doing great, and she can't seem to work out what it is. And I think so she was a lot of fun to play because of that. Like I think her frustrations were very human. It felt to me like she had her kids very young and she was still playing at being an adult, and I think that's something that I could definitely identify with, that kind of sensation of feeling like you're pretending to adult even when you are technically an adult yourself.
Okay, so on the flip side, what's been your least favourite roles?
Oh gosh, my least favourite. I don't really, that's not something I think about very often. I think when you do a shoot and there's tension, it's less to do with the role itself, because I think any good actor can make something out of any role, even if it's tiny. But if you're on set and there's tension on set, it makes it so unpleasant. And I run away from conflict. I hate conflict. So being on a set where like your director and your DOP or the soundie are having a bit of a Barney, that's always really deeply uncomfortable for me. Or when you're on a set where they've just not really thought about the comfort of their actors. So quite often in the low budget indie scene, sometimes I'll go on set and they won't have thought about. Well, I'll give an example. I did an indie feature a few years ago, and it was really low budget. I always want to support indie artists and indie directors because I think you're making your own work and I think that's so impressive. Like, I want to support that. But this particular director who was also producing his film and had written it, the film was so written through a male gaze that the only female characters in it were there to further the male narrative. There were scenes where there was a beautiful woman and her only role was to listen to the two men. She had no lines. Made no sense for her to be there. I was like, at this point, just don't have the woman in the scene. Like, it makes no sense. There were things that he got the female characters to do that no woman in their right mind would do or behave in that way, because that's just not how women behave. But it was also the day that we were shooting was one of the hottest days of the year. He had asked me to wear a sundress and high-heeled sandals, and had forgotten to tell me that I was going to be riding a bicycle in the scene, which obviously it was a short dress, it wasn't ideal. There were no toilets for the majority of the day, and obviously the men were absolutely fine because we were in a park, so they could go off and pee wherever they liked. The women, it's slightly more difficult to do that, and there was no water or food provided. So it was just one of those days. Like, we made it work, and luckily, like, the other actors were brilliant, and the guy was perfectly lovely. He was very sweet. I was so uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable with the narrative of the script. I was uncomfortable with the actual day. There was no physical comfort there. I kept improving. He was like, "Oh, this improv you're doing is great." I was like, "I have to, because otherwise the character does not make sense." Didn't say that to him, but
But in the back of your mind, you're going, I wanna.
wait, it's one of those things. Like, sometimes you leave a film and you want to give an exit interview on ways they could improve. I decided not to in this instance, because I thought, actually, I don't know how much it would help. And I think so much of the time as an actor, you're just grateful to be there as well. So you're willing to look over any manner of crap. But yeah, that one was particularly uncomfortable.
On top of that as well, indie directors or people in general don't have the resources of the big companies or big studios, so they're having to kind of do more of the work themselves. But I understand your point of view. It sounded like he had just one world view and just went, right, this is what makes a good film.
Yeah, I think the thing that I love about indie film is that sometimes having less of those resources makes people exceptionally creative, and you come up with ways of working that you wouldn't necessarily have come up with. Like, a great example of that is Host, which was a feature film made during lockdown by, oh my goodness, I can't actually remember the names of the filmmakers, but brilliant feature film. It's a horror film, basically filmed through Zoom. It's amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's on Amazon Prime. It's one of the best made horrors I've ever seen, low budget or high budget, because it's incredibly clever. It's genuinely scary. They had no budget at all. They did all of this stuff themselves, and they made it so compelling. I use it as an example of what indie filmmaking can be. The acting is exquisite. The script is exquisite. I think it's filmed in one or two maximum takes, because it's all Zoom. Like, honestly, one of the most impressive things I've seen made. But the flip side of that is that you also get people that don't have those resources, that don't necessarily have the, what's the word?
Capability?
I think the ability to kind of look at themselves in a constructively critical way. And I think I would say to any indie filmmaker, if you don't have the resources to do X, Y, Z, if you can't afford, like, loads of lenses, if you can't afford, like, a huge lighting rig, if you can't afford X, Y, Z, that's fine. But you've got to kind of, the best thing that you can do then is go and at least have conversations with people that know what they're doing so that you know what you're doing. Because if you go, well, we can't afford like lighting, but we'll have one stick light and I'm just going to put it at an actor's face, it's going to look awful. But if you go and chat to a lighting technician and say, look, we have no money at all. What can we do to utilise low budget stuff? What could we do? Like, if we have to work on a Blue Peter system of putting bottles together and light bulbs and things, like, what can we do? Then it's always going to turn out a bit better because at least you've got a little bit of expertise coming in. And that's so important. I think going to other people and asking their advice and getting feedback as well from people whose careers aren't impacted is another thing. I don't know if I phrased that particularly well, but yeah, like if you ask actors who could potentially be cast in the film what they think of the script before it gets made, you're very rarely going to get an honest response. Like they'll be far less likely to be really critical because they'll be worried about ruining their own chances of being in the film.
Right, you're better off going somewhere where they're not going to be involved.
Exactly. Like if you can get people to give feedback who understand the film industry, who understand script writing, or whatever bit of it you're asking for feedback about, but have absolutely no ties to the film, have no ties over their career, then that's always going to be your best approach.
When you said low budget, the production house, Bloomhouse, yeah, great grammar. I think that's how they got started. I think their first paranormal was something like 15. Their entire budget was 15,000, and I forget how much they made, but they just essentially 100x plus more that in the box office. And I think their latest Five Nights at Freddy's, I think that had a bigger budget, but initially they were very small, creative, and then that's how they got big.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think Blumhouse are really interesting because their unique selling point initially was definitely elevated indie, and I think that's now changed. They're now a more blockbustery, not quite blockbuster, but like definitely a high budget, high production value. And in a way, I think it's a shame because I think the content that they were creating, they were able to create more of it because they were helping out lower budget filmmakers. And the stuff that they were making was absolutely fantastic. It's not to say I don't enjoy the work that they're making now. I think it's great fun. And I'm really excited to see Five Nights at Freddy's as well. But it's just a very different methodology of filmmaking.
Yeah, often when you're forced in a situation, it's odd, you tend to do better than when you're not. Unless you're really good at it or unless you're really passionate about it. What do you...
I think there's a level at which your hands get tied a little bit more. The bigger the budget, the more people to answer to.
Yeah, unless you're the one completely in charge, then it's a bit... Yeah, but even then they still have to answer to you as well. What would you say about AI actors? Because I really wanted to ask you this one, because this is one thing that I don't want to happen. Yes, I see the appeal where, you might have an actor who's sick, but you can just use their AI counterpart. But the problem is, AI can't express emotions. I know this is an example from a voice actor, but I believe one of Ruby's voice actors, her character went through a abusive situation, but she herself did, so she was able to take her experience and put it into the character. And there was another short I seen, I think it was someone else I messaged for this, where I read the comments. All the comments said this exact situation was something that the writer themselves went through, and they're able to put that into the script. The issue is AI can only copy and paste, and there's also this other issue where there's just loads of these AI models that can like do voices. There's one which can render like really old photographs, not perfectly, but the detail is so good. And then what was the other issue? And then there's this other argument of just video making in general, because you can make loads of copies of yourselves. You could have in the future with YouTube where there's just one guy behind like 10 different channels and they've just used AI to make an avatar of themselves with tweaks like the hairstyle or the colour or whatever. What's your stance on it?
I'm super anti AI. I think for so many reasons. I think I am horrified to see how much AI is being used in so many different industries. I think we're seeing the downfall of a huge number of industries because of it. And I think the payoff isn't worth it. AI only exists when it is able to steal from humans. AI art is stolen art. It's not art that has been willingly given. It's sourced from artists that do not consent and is therefore deeply, deeply problematic. I think when it comes to being an actor, so many things concern me about the use of AI. One is that the studios don't want to pay properly for consent of AI, and we saw that throughout the strikes. They want to pay a tiny amount of money to be able to use your likeness forever, and that's awful. That's absolutely awful. You have no consent on what your face is being used for. I think we're starting to see it with deep fakes in porn, which is horrifying. And I just think it's absolutely shocking that can happen. That someone can have their face superimposed onto a porn star's face and people will believe it. It could potentially ruin lives. It could break up relationships. It could, it's so problematic. I have real issues with people who have, the likenesses of people who have died being used in advertising that they didn't consent to. We saw this years ago. There was an advert with Audrey Hepburn selling flakes. This might have been before your time. It was Audrey Hepburn in a car. She takes someone's car, a bus breaks down. She takes a flake off the bus driver or something like that, and then she eats it. And all I could think was, she didn't agree to this. This was not something that she agreed to while she was alive. This was something that's been created in her image since. And you kind of think, okay, well, that's quite an innocent example. It's chocolate. But what if it's something that you, within your lifetime, disagreed with? So, for example, for me, that would be vapes. I really, on a very basic level, disagree with vapes being available at all. I think they're terrible. I think they appeal and advertise towards children. I think they're awful. If I found out that my likeness was after my death going to be used to sell vapes, I would be furious. I'd be rolling in my grave. There are so many problems. And then, I don't know if you've seen this, the trailer for the AI film. Have you seen this?
I seen one yesterday. Someone made an entire film trailer for The Legend of Zelda.
Oh no, this was a original concept that was a rom-com using an AI scriptwriter, AI backgrounds, AI design, AI actors, all of that was AI. The trailer was made from AI. Didn't make any sense. Made no sense. There was still too much uncanny valley, so you didn't connect with the characters in the slightest. Because it's AI, it doesn't really understand humour, it doesn't really understand nuance, so everything was just whack you around the head with a hammer levels of trite. And you think, this can't compare to someone who is a skilled writer and the nuance that they're putting into this. It's a machine trying to emulate emotion.
That's what I said. I honestly think it could turn into a glorified colour grader in film. It's why would I hire a makeup artist when I can just... We still have the actors, we still have the camera crew, we still have the lighting, but we get rid of the makeup department and just have AI do it for you, because we've already got this. I seen something yesterday, for this our conversation, where they had, I think it was special effects. There was this one guy who was, I want to say in his 60s or 70s. Not only did they de-age the guy, but they also got the darkness out of under his eyes. So I could see that being a thing where they just completely killed
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess for de-aging, yes. But then, even then, the thing about, for example, using AI instead of makeup artists makes me go, again, they can choose to alter your face without your consent. When you've got a makeup artist, you can say to them, actually, I'm really insecure about that. Or I really like my freckles. Can you try not to hide my freckles? I've on a let's take this back to a really, really basic level. Played with a couple of the AI filters on TikTok and stuff. And something that I've noticed is they get rid of my freckles and they get rid of my mole as well, my beauty mark. And I just think it's not an imperfection. That's part of my face. I've had this since I was little. Like, why are you getting rid of something that it's not like a spot? It's not going to go away. It's a bit like as an actor when you've got headshots and they Photoshop your face so much that you don't recognise yourself.
Right.
It stops you from looking how you should look and how you will look when you walk into a room. And I think if we overuse AI, not only are we putting people out of jobs, we're kind of handcuffing ourselves in terms of creativity.
I don't think the authenticity is there. Do you listen to Modern Wisdom? It's a podcast. No. The host had Gary Vaynerchuk, or Gary V, as he's more commonly known, and he said he thinks AI is not going to be as good as utilised as well as people think because you haven't got the authenticity there. He says, yeah, you can fool people for a short amount of time, but eventually it'll catch on. I personally think it will implode on itself because we're already seeing it now with AI art. There's just so many models to make the art. Now with that, I've figured out, I don't know about anyone else, but I've personally figured it out where you can tell the AI art because it's got like a bit of a gloss to it. Yeah. But there's just so many like programs for it now. It's going to turn into what's happened with the streaming service. All these ones subscription models, but people don't really have the money to pay for all of it, and they're always so specific. And the examples I gave earlier, like with the audio, with the resolution, with the like backgrounds and the multiplying, that adds up. I don't think it's going to do as well as people think. I'm not sure. Would you say that's fair, or have you got another? Yeah.
Honestly, who knows? Who knows? I hope it will implode in on itself. I don't have much positive to say about it, to be honest. I think in terms of doing things like painting out wires, and I think the problem is AI makes us lazy as well, is the other thing. And when you get lazy in a job, we overlook stuff, and because it's a machine and because it's not human, it will. For example, if you use AI for, let's say, colouring out wires in a historic film, it is likely to not recognise things sometimes because to an AI model, it might look like a branch of a tree, but to a human eye, you could go, oh, that's not a branch. In the same way that a lot of AI art, when it's of people, they accidentally give them too many fingers because they're just like, oh yeah, fingers, we'll just give you a certain number because we know you've got fingers. But a human would go, actually, we've only got, 8 fingers and 2 thumbs. So it's those tiny moments of nuance that I think sometimes get lost with AI. And I think we'll start, if the more it's used in film, the more we're going to start seeing those areas creeping in.
Well, it's going to divide. I think with that, it will make a bigger divide between the ones who really focus on everything and the ones who are just lazy. I think in that respect, it'll be beneficial for that. You can actually tell who cares versus the ones who are just doing it, I'll just chuck it out there sort of thing.
Yeah.
I can see that happening. What would your dream role be in acting?
I never know how to answer that. I get asked that a lot. If you had asked me a few years ago, I probably would have said Batgirl, but I think I've probably aged out of that now.
You've got the hair for it.
I'm probably closer to Batwoman rather than Batgirl now, sadly, because I think Barbara Gordon's such a cool character. For me, the roles that get me really, really excited are roles that are emotionally complex, where a character is not 100% good nor 100% bad, but very, very human. I'd like characters that are morally ambiguous, that are just people. And I think that's why shows like Bad Sisters, like Catastrophe, like Friends from College are so interesting, because you see people at their most human. They're not supposed to be really good people or really bad people. They're just supposed to be people that mess things up and that get things wrong and that have to do better and learn lessons. And that's a really interesting thing to embody as an actor.
So not really the anti-hero archetype, but more.
But I love playing an anti-hero as well. It's why I enjoy playing Poison Ivy so much.
What's
But I think, yeah, I played Poison Ivy in a fan film called Growing Shadows, and I very much played her as an anti-hero rather than a villain.
I could only find a
But
trailer for that. Did that ever get fully made or?
yeah,
Oh,
we made it. It was a short film. It's been released on YouTube, so it's available there. And that was entirely fan funded. Again, very low budget, but everyone who came involved was a massive geek. And we were lucky enough to have some spectacularly talented people working on it. So I was very happy with that. It was a real labour of love.
is there any roles which you don't want to do then?
None that I can think of. I'm never a fan of those kind of slightly Brechtian roles where it's like, she is girlfriend, she is a mother, she is, because you're defined, and this happens more to women than it does to men, but we become defined by our gender in those roles in a way that I think is quite dull. I don't mind playing characters who are those things, and that is part of their character, but when that's the only thing we know about them, it's just like,
Very one-dimensional, not a lot. Okay. How do you make
yeah.
that mental shift between yourself and that character? And have you ever had it where the cameras are still rolling, but you're still that character? They go, Carter's like, I die, mum.
Oh God, yeah, like a few times. I think it's something as an actor I've had to get better at, because what you don't want to do is carry the day home with you, carry the character home with you. That's how people mess up their lives. Like, you need to be able to let go of the character when the camera's cut and when you walk away and go back to your family and your friends and your life. I think the biggest example I have of struggling to let go of that was, oh God, what I don't know actually. That I think it was when I was a lot younger, like a lot younger. When I was doing sort of a lot of theatre, that was harder. I think when you're on stage as an actor, for me personally, I can't speak for all actors, but for me it is more all encompassing. And I think there is more of a sense of you are living that part, because you can't really see the audience. It's, the light is in your eyes, so you can't hopefully see the faces of the people that are watching you. You're just on stage being in that moment, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about theatre. When I'm acting on screen, because you cut and you redo the scene so many times, like, the lighting's wrong on that one, the plane flew overhead, so I've got to redo the sound. Because there's more of an element of it being a device, I think you're less likely to get lost in the character, which I think can be quite a good thing. There's a lot of slightly wanky nonsense about, like, I Stanislavski, I was very method in that part. But I've seen a lot of actors who are very method, and I've seen a lot of actors who are able to let go of the character when they leave the scene, and I don't think there's a huge amount of difference in the acting ability or the authenticity of the character. I think it's just a little bit of maybe actor's vanity going on there.
Actor's vanity?
Yeah, that vanity of kind of going, I was so in the character that I actually damaged myself in some way, which is just, unfortunately, I think it's the way a lot of very young actors think. When we all have a moment of it when we get into the industry, we're like, oh my God, I was so emotionally fraught by this character that, I nearly had a nervous breakdown. You're like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. You're just as believable if you're able to walk away with a smile after a day of having to cry a lot.
I thought you meant, I got so into my character, ow, my knee, I banged it on the table. Yeah. Do you have any influence over what your character does, or is that just entirely up to the director, the writers?
It varies. I mean, in terms of the ongoing narrative of the script, no, because you've got your where your character needs to end up. But there are sometimes films where, like Adam Ethan Crowe, who directed Lair and Warhol's fantastic for this. He will come up to you in a scene and say, "I wrote this line. It's not working. It's on me. Can you fix it?" You know what the character is like. What would the character say in that moment? And I think he's very good at like stepping away from. He's very good at not being vain about his script when we're on set. He will just kind of go, "It's not working. Let go of it. Let's do something else." And that's always really interesting. I'm very much an actor who likes to play around with structure of lines a little bit. Obviously, if I'm on set, like you get a sense for it as an actor. If you're involved in a project where you get the sense that they want the lines verbatim, you absolutely do it that way. But if you're comfortable enough with a director and writer that you can say, "Are you happy for me to change this up a bit, as long as I don't change the cues and I keep get the meaning across?" Sometimes that can make for a really lovely in the moment performance. But it does vary production to production, and it varies on your relationship with the director, I think, and the kind of film that you're making.
Aislinn De'Ath, everyone. Where can people find you, and what can people expect from you in the upcoming future?
Well, I'm on social media. So you just look my name up on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok, and you'll be able to find me there. We have Warhol will hopefully be coming out, I'm hoping by the end of the year, but we're not sure yet. We're still waiting to hear on that one. I'm currently working on a lot of writing because I've been on maternity leave after having my baby. So I've been working on a lot of scripts. So hopefully we should start seeing some work going on with those. And then I have another project coming out called Johnny, which is a kind of a web series project by a fabulous creator called Kwame Augustine. And that should hopefully be coming online soon.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed that episode, then we have the playlist right here. If you don't enjoy that episode, you might enjoy some clips instead. Which one do you prefer?